We'll go ahead then and start. You're all very welcome. As a theatre event, we should probably have thought of some pre-show music, so apologies for that. But yeah, you're very, very welcome. I'm going to kick off and in a couple of moments hand you over to Fergal. So yes, good morning and welcome. And it's a wonderful turnout and we're thrilled. Welcome virtually to the Theatre Royal. We are based in Waterford City in Ireland. And I'm saying that for all of you who are joining us from overseas, you're very welcome. It's great to meet new friends. To all our local and national partners and friends, thank you for joining us. As I said, we're in the beautiful vestibule foyer here at the Theatre Royal. And you will also be able to view our 231 auditorium in which our host Fergal is based this morning. Just to say that the team at the theatre are delighted to be part of this event. We're thrilled to be able to host it during this time, to be live inside our building, and also to be part of such a positive experience. So firstly, I'll introduce you to our host. Fergal O'Neill is Managing Director of ATPO, an enterprise created to encourage alternative and positive thinking processes for organizations. Fergal has wide-ranging experience and enthusiasm for positive project management, and certainly his positive approach has encouraged us here at Theatre Royal to continue to find new ways to work through the current world we live in. And we thank him for that. In considering what Resurgence for the Arts should look like, Fergal knew that the offering should be a diverse one, encompassing all aspects of the arts. And in that, Fergal brought together an eclectic range of outstanding arts practitioners. Siobhan Brady, harpist; Sean Corcoran, environmental artist; David Duffy, musician and producer; Owen Kilkenny, production and project manager; and Megan Nolan, author, journalist and critic. All of whom have brought their arts practice to an extremely high standard of presentation and performance. And I know their contributions this morning will inspire and excite. And we welcome all 5 of you this morning. So before I hand you over to Fergal, I think it's very important that I highlight the theatre team. Dermot, Sean, Anushka, Deirdre, Michelle, John have all adapted their ways of working and thinking and have worked tirelessly over the past number of weeks to learn new ways of working and presenting work. Today's event is one such occasion that has led to a new way of thinking and presenting. And thanks again, Fergal, for this opportunity. So without further ado, let's kick off. I'll hand you over to Fergal, who is live from inside the Theatre Royal in Waterford. Thanks, Sean.
Very much alive. How are you, everybody? I can see lots of lights. I can see some faces, but lots of lights, and that's because I'm in this wonderful spot. Thank you to Mary and the Theatre Royal team for making it possible to have this event today. I hope you'll all be enthralled, inspired, and if you're not, I'd be shocked because we have a wonderful guest list. And yourselves, I hope you really get involved in all the various activities we're going to have. So to make sure the activities work really well, Sean is going to give you some housekeeping before we do anything else. So I'll hand you over to Sean. Thank you, Sean. We're going to start off in just a moment talking about mindset, reset and momentous shift, which is basically my baby. I'll talk you through that, particularly through an arts prism. We're going to have our inputs from our speakers. We're going to have that through the session where they're going to talk about all the ideas that they have. But we're also going to have lots of engagement activities for yourselves to give you a chance to network and really, really use that opportunity if you can, and to help us all to build on the ideas presented. And that's the X bit of the Resurgence 25X. So just to give you a real taste of that, we're going to start off with an activity straight away, which is a pairing up activity. And if we just need you to introduce yourself to whoever you're paired up with and to share your hopes and thoughts for today. It's a 2-minute activity. And I'll go back to Sean to let him take care of that. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope you got a good bit of a chat and a bit of a warm up on this freezing cold day in Waterford anyway. So just, I'm going to talk a little bit about mindset, momentum shift, that concept before we go into the speakers. The Resurgence 25X idea, it's born from this concept that we can all move our mindsets to positive. If we do that, opportunities and new ways of living and working that have arisen from COVID-19, that we can embrace them, work on them, make them better, and with that momentum from them, go for an even better future over the coming years. And this is really particularly true for the arts world, because it's been ravaged by COVID-19. As you will see from our contributors, the arts can rise even better than before, even though that has happened to the people working in the arts. So I'll just give you my own personal experience. I'm going to move around a little bit from how the arts helped me to kind of get a change in mindset. I was 19, I was in college. 19 meant I thought I knew everything. I still probably think I know everything, but I come to the conclusion I actually know very little. Possibly that's coming to me now, but at 19 I really thought I had it, and I thought I'd read everything, and I thought I had kind of had it all figured, and I was a bit kind of tired of I'd gone off kind of reading a bit, and it was kind of sort of not having the same effect on me as it would have had when I was 14 or 15. And then I came across this name in college, Émile Zola. Here he is up the back here. And, you know, the first thing that drew me to Émile Zola, because in Ireland at the time when I was 19, there were very few people with a surname that began with a Z or a Z, as they say in the US. And so I kind of go, oh, there's an interesting name. And then I kind of looked at it, and Émile Zola, somebody spoke to me about Émile Zola, said he was a great writer. And I said, checked out what he wrote, and it was 19th century, late 19th century. He wrote about kind of social inequality. I thought I'd read everything I could possibly read about that, but I obviously hadn't. So I then basically, I came across this book by Émile Zola, Germinal. And Germinal, that's the original, probably the copy I had didn't look a bit like that. But, you know, again, it was about a 19th century mining town. And I thought I'd read a lot about, you know, inequality, that sort of thing. But I opened the book, and after about 3 pages, I was completely hooked on the writing, because the writing was just in your face. It was just beautiful. It was wonderful. It was evocative, but it was also really, really harsh. The characters were completely, there were no good guys, bad guys. Everybody was good and bad. It was just fantastically put together. So the actual skill in writing was there, but also what was coming out of it was actually very, very kind of inspiring for me. And so basically that particular story got me going, and I started reading a bit more. And it's based on a true story, a 19th century mining town in France, the ultimate in kind of poverty, degradation, capitalism at its worst. And into this town comes this character called Etienne, who basically, you know, fits in quite well initially, but bit by bit, because of he's coming from a different place and a different mindset, he changes the kind of thinking of a lot of the miners and people who there had been downtrodden for so long. And after a certain amount of time, the people basically who were there decided to say, we've had enough of this type of thing. And so they had a strike. Now, unfortunately, the strike didn't work out too well. But what happened was there was momentum set up from that movement of people changing their mindsets and going for, this isn't good enough, we can be better, to make for a really long-term momentum change. And that's the kind of thing for me, like within this concept of the arts. The arts can get us to think about things in a different way. It was beautifully written, this book, but it was very, very harsh at the same time. But it really enervated and exalted me and made me think differently about things. And that's a great thing when you're 19. But it's also a great thing for all of us coming out of COVID within the arts. And you're going to see it from our contributors, is the arts can do so many things to help us to get now out of this really tough period that we're in and into a much, much better way. And we need to bring the arts along with us, and we need to look after the arts while we're doing that. So really, this is what today is about. This is what the speakers are about. I'm going to hand you over to Mary to talk you through our first speaker. Thank you, Mary.
Okay, so each speaker, of which we have 5, were each given the same brief. They needed to consider what COVID and their practice during COVID meant to them, but more so they were asked to consider how the arts, and particularly their own practice, can now recover after COVID. And so Resurgence 5 by 25 was their brief. They had to come up with 5 examples of resurgence out of this current time. So each of them, over their 12-minute presentation, will talk us through that. Okay, that's pretty much it. They have been asked to pre-record because they are here with us this morning, so they're relaxing in their chairs. No pressure, because they've already done the work and we're about to view them. So firstly, Fergal, I think you're going to introduce our first speaker, isn't that right?
I am indeed.
Yeah, so Fergal, over to you.
Okay, Sean Corcoran, I think you're here today. I'll give you a wave through the lights there. Hi, Sean. Sean's an environmental artist. He's best known these days for his sand art. He draws massive pictures on beaches around Ireland and the UK with a garden rake. That's some going, Sean, and you're still, you've just recently been at the Larne Art Festival, which was a fantastic success, and it's a real testament to your actual vision and how you work, which we'll hear all about in a moment. Collaborative art has always been a big part of your work, Sean, and you and your wife, Miranda, run the Art Hand, which was, until recently, an art school. Since last March, that's last year, they've had to adapt their business to an online gallery in order to be sustainable. So I'm going to pass you over to Sean, and we'll just hear what you came up with.
So, hello, my name is Sean Corcoran. I'm an artist. My wife and I run a business out here on the Copper Coast near Bunman called the Art Hand. And the Art Hand, up until more recent times, has been an art school, but we've had to change and adapt to the times. It's been a strange year that we've all been through, and a bit longer. So I suppose I'd like to say thank you to Fergal and to Mary and to the Theatre Royal for having me as part of this Resurgence for the Arts event. I'm delighted to kind of contribute whatever it is. Hopefully I might have something to add to the debate. So I suppose before I recorded this, I've kind of been thinking about it for a few weeks. It's April now when you're watching this, but it's actually February for me. So I hope the last few weeks have been kind to you, and the idea of, I don't know what's happened in the last few weeks. I've got events coming up in March and different things that I'm working on around. So that whole idea of, you know, where we're at now is an important thing. And I suppose before I kind of give an insight myself, I would just like to kind of think about for a second what the word resurgence means. So I looked it up in the dictionary, and according to that, I've written it down here. It says that resurgence is an increase or revival after a period of little activity, popularity, or occurrence. So in other words, it's like a comeback or recovery. It's like rising again, or it's like the resumption, or it's a rebirth, or indeed a revitalization. So from that point of view, the way I look at it anyway, certainly as an artist and as somebody trying to make a living, you know, we have 2 young kids. Well, they're teenagers now, Alfie and Matilda. And really, I suppose we're trying to make a living out here out in the middle of nowhere in a beautiful part of the world on the cliffs here. But in terms of the resurgence idea, I feel that before we can figure out how to move forward, we need to be able to look back at where we were, and then we need to be able to look at where we are now, and maybe appreciate where we are now as well for many people, before we can kind of take positive steps to revitalize the world or the arts, depending on what way you look at it. So I'm going to start by looking back. And I suppose for me, back in 2020, last February and last March, like from a personal point of view, Like I had some exciting opportunities on the go. I just completed an international commission basically for the Welsh government, where we did a piece of sand art here in Ireland, while simultaneously another sand artist, Mark Trainer, in Wales, created a piece of sand art over there. And it was a symbolic gesture between Ireland and Wales that connected the two countries through the conservation, through a good news story with the red kite, the bird, that's been brought back from extinction basically in Wales, and through cooperation has returned to Ireland as well now. So I suppose it was a good news story, and it was quite a high profile piece to be working on. And directly after that, I flew to Texas, and I was working at a festival, honored to be a featured artist at the Llano Earth Art Festival. So 30 or 40 artists, I guess, from all around the world were participating in Texas in this beautiful, amazing landscape, in 2 or 3 weeks build up to this event where the public would come and mingle with the artists. And it's a beautiful, beautiful event. But that was March, and really, I suppose, like I had to come back out of there in quite a bizarre situation. Like I had been literally on my hands and knees in Texas, making art for 2 or 3 weeks, and disconnected from the planet really in many ways. And then a state of emergency was declared in Texas. So, you know, I managed to get back through the help of some of my American friends, Gretchen, thank you, and all the team over there. But like it was pandemonium getting through airports and flying from one airport to the next and trying to get back into Europe. Eventually got into back into Europe and managed to connect back into Ireland then. But like people running through airports, screaming, crying, like the staff were completely difficult to deal with, shall we say. It was a world crisis, had literally unfolded what felt like to me almost like overnight. So I suppose as an environmental artist, as a land artist, many people would know me from the work I do on beaches with the sand art. Like it's quite a kind of a pensive, mindful process in terms of how I create my work and how I build myself up to creating the work, in terms of having myself in the state of mind to be ready to bring as much beauty to the world in terms of what I try and showcase and represent in my work is an important part. Positivity is an important thing to me. So for me, it was like an overnight, suddenly the world had changed. And so I went into quarantine in the loft above the studio here for 2 weeks then when I returned. And I suppose from then, looking back, even before that, I suppose that what we were here in the Art Hand was an art school. We were teaching workshops, stained glass and mosaic, and outdoor events on the beach and at festivals around Ireland and the UK. And suddenly that whole environment was no more. That was the end of that kind of art form. Would never be collaborative art, like in terms of, like, for example, with mosaic, where hundreds of people are gathering treasure and sticking it all together. That's not appropriate in the pandemic. So like that completely went. That was our main form of income, I guess, was collaborative mosaic. So we had to kind of consider, how are we going to maintain our livelihood? So in terms of where we are right here, right now, thanks to the Waterford Chamber that we're a member of, and the local enterprise office, we were fortunate enough to get funding for a new website, and basically thearthand.com if you'd like to have a look. But basically the Art Hand is no longer really an art school, and it's now more steering towards being an art gallery, which will one day hopefully be a physical gallery where you can come and visit us here on the Copper Coast. But at the moment it's an online gallery, and it's our studio space for myself and my wife Miranda, who's an artist as well. So that's kind of where we're at now. We're selling our work. I sell sand art prints, and Miranda sells her paintings. That's our main source of income at the moment. Now we've lots of things in the pipeline. We're planning lots of things for the future. But I suppose when you look back and you figure out where you are now, there's that sense of you got to take a deep breath and kind of realize that, well, you know, thankfully, my family hasn't been severely impacted by the pandemic, and so you kind of have to appreciate where you're at in the world. And I suppose it's times like, you know, when I look back to last February and last March, working with Mark Traynor while he was in Wales and I was in Ireland, and sadly last July Mark Traynor drowned in a tragedy at sea. And so reflective moments when you kind of look back before the crisis, shall we say, and you know, it gives you a sense of appreciation for where we are now. And even with the festival in Texas that I was at last March, like where we're at now is I'm delighted to be part of a small crew, including the people in Texas and some artists in the UK. I suppose there's about 10 or 12 of us that have been pulling it together as a revival or resurgence. It's an online festival. It will actually at this point have happened. Hopefully it all went well back at the end of March, just last week, I guess, from where you're looking at this video. So like that's an example of like putting things into perspective. Like I guess with, you know, Mark, you know, and you know, I never met him, but we worked together at the same time, and we kind of like spent weeks and weeks building up to that with the PR companies and all the film crews and so on. So it was kind of like as if we got to know each other, and we had plans to connect in Ireland and Wales not long after that. And so things change. So the future, I suppose, like I personally, you know, I'm working on a couple of projects. That festival, the online festival, which is hopefully over by now, that's part of it. So do visit that if you'd like to look back on some of the recordings. The Lano, that's double L ANO, Lano Land Art Festival. You see all the recordings will be on Facebook, on their Facebook page by now, to look back on if you do wish to. Another project I'm working on is the Celtic Corridor, and the Celtic Corridor is a project again of its time, because we feel it's kind of like ground zero in terms of tourism in Ireland at the moment and globally. So like a colleague of mine, Joe Lunigan, have been working on this idea for years, but we actually only launched it last July with a trip along the Irish section of the Celtic Corridor. And the Celtic Corridor, it's about connecting communities all along the perimeter of the Celtic Sea. And this is the Celtic Sea where we are here on the southern coast of Ireland, but it also touches parts of Wales, Cornwall, Devon, and Brittany in northern France. So that's an exciting project that I'm hoping will develop over the months and years to come, that if we can connect the communities all the way along, then it can become a sustainable and environmental tourism initiative. So listen, thank you very much. Look out for each other, take care, and I look forward to being part of an exciting future in Waterford and in Ireland and globally connecting across the world. Thank you very much. All the best. Bye.
Thank you, Sean. The work that you do, we've been all watching it for many years. It is an inspiration. When Fergal told me that he had asked you to partake in this, I wasn't a bit surprised. The work that yourself and Miranda carry out through the art hand is so positive. It really is. It's bright and it's beautiful and it's incredibly positive. And best of luck to you both. It was really lovely. So now it's my job to introduce our next speaker, which we're now traveling from the Copper Coast out through Moorway all the way over to Glasgow. And I'm introducing David Duffy. David is a professional musician, producer, and DJ. He has played in a host of venues across Scotland. He's played in the legendary King Tut's, and he has played in the O2 Academy. He is currently studying sound production at college with an eye on a master's over the next 3 years. David was involved in a charity musical called I Was Gonna. David, I'm not even going to try and a Scottish accent there. I'll leave you do that later on, maybe. And his role on that project is musical director. The charity is designing material that appeals to children and adults with a range of disabilities and our mental health issues. And the work is an aid to assisting them with their well-being. Again, another very obvious candidate for this. So I'm now going to pass you over to David Duffy. Thank you, Sean.
Hi, my name's David Duffy, and I'm delighted to be a guest here at the R25X Resurgence for the Arts post-COVID-19. A little bit about myself. Obviously, first of all, thanks to Fergal for having me. It's a distinct pleasure and a real honour. Thank you very much. Now, a little bit about myself. I'm a musician from Glasgow. I have obviously been badly affected by the pandemic, and I was forced to kind of think outside the box as to how we could keep going as an artist. So I started to play online on Saturdays, and that kind of kept me going. Then I was asked if I'd like to do a local radio DJ show, and I thought, you know, I'm going to say yes. So I did. I then decided to go to college to study sound production, and I've also been asked to help develop a musical experience for a charity called I Was Gonna. Now, these are all absolutely amazing things, and they have happened as a result of being put into a position of, what do I do? What do I do for my art? What do I do for myself as an artist? And also as well, being asked to speak at such a fine event as well by Mr. Fergal O'Neill. And again, thank you for that. But without much further ado, I will get on and I will tell you about my 5 ideas. The first idea I had was about maintaining an online presence and about taking your product further afield. There's a lot of people have conveyed to me that they wouldn't normally go to gigs, and having watched me online, they've really enjoyed the musical experience and they'd like to keep doing that. My idea was to set up a system where we could have a remote recording access of either a large studio or a large room, and we would then broadcast or record and have listening parties all around the world under the banner of a group or a name or a company. And then obviously we license out the product to the people in the various locations around the world. Bit of money, bit of revenue can turn over. They can make a bit of dollar. Our artists can make a little bit of money. And also as well, because they're performing live, they'll get royalties for that performance from the PRS, who we'll discuss later. But these things would be, it would be great for us to blend the online experience, and also with post-COVID, we're going to go back to live. It's definitely going to happen. But as I say, there is a market there for people who don't want to do that and who would love to still have that musical experience. And I think that would be a great thing moving forward. And also, being from the UK and with Brexit and the complications that that's going to throw up with touring mainland Europe, this is another way in which the artists can still engage acts and their fans in mainland Europe, and to develop that and to also make a little bit of money as well. And everybody can have that experience. And obviously within that, the technology will get better, the access to that kind of equipment. And it's already very, very good and accessible. So, as I say, post-COVID and moving forward, that would definitely be, I think, my idea for number 1 for us moving forward. Now, number 2, my second idea. I've been asked many times if I was available to teach children, all the way up to adults as well, but as a result, I thought of taking small groups of students and giving them an education, not only how to perform, but the management and sound engineering aspect of the industry also. I'd looked at developing a syllabus that would give the student a rounded education that would allow them to be self-contained within the music industry. By that, I mean that they would learn how to play music, they'd learn how to record it, edit and master it, and then they would gain an understanding of how to promote themselves online and to create their own musical identity. We would also look at the aspects of the industry like collection agencies, how to register, and all the other administrative duties they would need to conduct, setting up their own record labels and being in publishing companies, etc., so that they could make sure that the revenue is generating in their it's a viable job for them. That's a lot of people's problem, is the fact of the viability of how to maintain as an artist and make money. Obviously, when you sign record deals, etc., especially with larger companies, they take a lion's share of your money. So, as I say, the education, not just performance-based, looking at the industry and starting, as I say, from a rudimentary level all the way up, and having it as a supplement to what they're learning at school, you know, so they can have that backup knowledge. I hate to say it, but a kind of rock school kind of idea, but obviously a bit more encompassing of a larger part of the industry, and as I say, gearing it towards how they can move forward. Now, for my third idea, I've been involved with a charity called I Was Goni, and what we're doing is we're working with people with severe disabilities, mental health issues, learning disabilities, and the creator of the charity, his son is autistic, and he had noticed that when they go to any of these kind of experiences, whether it's music or anything, there's a real sense of euphoria that carries on for a very long time after the performance itself. So what we wanted to do was to cater an experience directly to and catered for specific groups, whether it's people with severe disabilities or just learning disabilities or long-term unemployed, mental health issues, or even people in groups with mixtures of all those, and catering it bespokely to their needs. Because obviously my own son is autistic and he doesn't like loud noises, and he's very kind of sensory sensitive, you know. So we're still developing those and obviously tailoring it to the varying groups that we're going to do. But I do believe that that is a future for musical experience, because obviously when we go to gigs, we all know that we get a euphoric response from the songs that we love, sung by the artists we love. So that is where we've been looking at directing that. As I say, I Was Going to charity, and it's how Mr. Fergal O'Neill had actually got in contact with me because he'd seen the work we'd been doing and realised that it has got some real legs. And yes, looking forward to developing that further. And that's been my third idea. Now, we all know that in the modern world that musical artists aren't getting their fair share of streaming, be it Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, any of these stream sites, anything that's happening, there's very little money going to the artists. I'd like to see an online streaming service that's owned by the artists, all equally. What they put in, they will get a reasonable recompense for the amount of plays that their bands actually get. And also as well, if you tie it into these people being shown these artists being shown how to develop themselves and how to have their own record labels and publishing, then they would retain the rights and the ownership. So when putting their music onto these sites, they know that no matter where it's played, how it's streamed, that they will get a reasonable cut, and also a cut that means that they can actually have, as I say, a viable shot at making a living within the music industry. And it can only benefit music lovers as well, because if musicians have that extra money coming in, then they have extra money to develop their own art the way they want, without scrutiny from a third party that wants you to write the next Ed Sheeran song or the next Rihanna or Beyonce or whatever song, and any artist. And I'm probably showing my age there. Imagine Dragons, who's new, who knows? But that's what we're looking for, as I say, as a collective society that owns the music, owns the site, and we benefit from that financially. Now, for my fifth idea, with everything that we've discussed thus far, from the lessons all the way through for the charity, I would love to see it culminate in a community event, a local festival, you know, displaying all the arts, you know, dancers, actors, artists, musicians, and all the varying aspects, including the logistics of how to put on an event, the management of an event, tie it in with the children's classes, a kind of like an end of year project that we're looking at. So they would be learning about the recordings, learning how to produce that, and how to, as I say, promote online. And these events can be tied in so that they're promoting that, as well as learning, as I say, how to function in the music industry. It's also going to be really, really important for community spirit, I feel. To have that, as I say, collective effort people, it would bring us back together, people seeing their children dancing, having fun, being educated, but also under supervision of people who are the professionals in the industry, so that they're getting a valid education in something that could be extraordinarily tangible for them. My son wants to be a songwriter, and I had absolutely nothing to do with it. I let him come to that conclusion on his own, and he is loving it. So I've been inspired by that, and that's what I would like to do, is harness that energy. And obviously with other people's, like the young to old, I feel that there's a lot of people when they get to a certain age, they count themselves out of the musical experience completely. Like, oh, I'm too old, or this, that, and the next thing. No, not too old. As I say though, fifth idea, big community festival, drawing on all the experiences, linked in with everything else I've been talking about, especially the educational part of it, and especially with the younger ones, so that they can be involved and be totally emboldened by it. I was never given an opportunity to do anything like that within the industry when I was that age, and I would have jumped at it. And as I say, I think that that's moving forward to develop them from a young age, and then taken into the industry as it comes back, very, very viable. So those are my 5 ideas for the Resurgence 25X. Once again, thanks to Fergal O'Neill for having me along. It's been an absolute blast. So I think I need to lie down after that. It's quite an experience talking to you all. I look forward to hearing all the other ideas from all the other the commentators and everybody that's given up all their time to do this. And once again, thank you to Fergal, and I'm David Duffy, and I'll be signing out. Thank you very much for listening.
Now, thanks, David. That's a fantastic accent. We all loved it here. It's just wonderful to hear. And the brilliant ideas, when you combine it with that accent, you just can't lose. And thanks, Sean, there beforehand. We're going to have our kind of workshop, and with the numbers that we have now, we're going to break up into just 4 or 5 groups, but there'll be more than one person in each group this time. And the idea really in these workshops is to give you a chance to kind of talk about those ideas you've heard. You've heard 10, and to kind of add to them. And so the kind of task for the group, it's about a 9-minute session, is in your group, just pick at least one idea from each of the 2 inputs you've just heard. And then just ask yourselves, how could you as an individual or as a group help to see it implemented, any of those ideas? How can it be developed further? Are there any other ideas at this stage that have come to you? See, the whole concept of the Resurgence 25X piece is for you as attendees to add and multiply all the ideas you've just heard. There are 2 people kind of very important to making that happen in a group. There's a kind of, we're going to call them a room leader. It really, somebody has to volunteer to say, I'm going to basically manage this group. I'm going to make sure everybody gets a chance to talk. And you're going to be able to kind of share the outcome of your discussion, some points from that, because after this session, I'm going to come back to you and talk to different people from different groups. And then there's a recorder, kind of a wee job. And that's basically, if one person could just record the ideas, you can put them in bullet points on your PC. And if you could email them to me at fergalneil@atpo.online after the session, but also if you, when it comes after you chat together, we'll have a feedback, and if you just put 2 of the ideas from the group up on the chat box, and we'll just go through those ideas just to make sense of them. We're going to just look at the ideas that you've just heard. We have Sean's 5 ideas there, and there's the 5 there. I won't read through them. You can just look at them yourselves. And David's ideas after that. Okay, there's just a summary of his 5 ideas. Just have a peep at that. Now, probably some of the ideas will have popped out to you more than others. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into our kind of groups and just see how you get on. So it's just, we need somebody to lead and somebody to record. And thanks a million. And we'll see you in about maybe 7 or 8 minutes. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope you got something out of that. What we're going to do now is we're going to try and bring the ideas that you've had in your breakout rooms and bring them together. So the people who volunteered to be the recorders, if you could just put 2 of the ideas from your breakout room on the chat box, we'll take about 2 minutes to let that fill up. And what we'll do is, after we've got the ideas on the chat box, I'll talk through some of them, and I'll go to some of the groups to kind of expand on them, if you could. So hopefully you can get your ideas on the chat box now, if you can. Okay, we'll let people kind of put in some more ideas as we go. We'll just pick out some, and we just have to go for one just to start. Somebody wrote down, is it Donald Flynn? Oh, Flynn. Going corporate, but not too corporate. Donald, are you there?
I'm here. I don't know if you can see me. I'm having camera trouble, but you should be able to hear me.
Yes. What do you mean by that, Donald?
Well, I was talking about, say, I know that the theatre, for example, where you are there, have taken to doing, I suppose, less arts focused events, more like conferences and that kind of thing. And I think it's in terms of everything we've learned about streaming and the amazing work that Colin Shanahan has been doing for the theatre, there's, you see, I was listening the other day to one of the most successful voiceover artists in the UK, the man who reads the numbers of the lotto balls. And he was talking about how that his job has opened up to so many people these days with technology. So he's finding more and more that to get regular work, he's having to go into the corporate world and doing game shows and events and stuff on stage. But I just think that the events industry can bring so much to that world where there is so much funding, but also make those events far less dull than they might otherwise be. Okay, very good. Okay, that's definitely, I think I've got the idea now. Okay, we'll go on to another idea, and we'll come back and forth. There's one here just down towards the bottom, towards Maureen Costello here. We agreed that an artist-owned platform would enable artists to produce and earn. Our additional idea is that there should be a means by which people could choose a genre and filter the songs to create their own type of listening experience. We also agree with the ideas for making music help children and young people flourish post-COVID. So Maureen, do you just want to tell us a little bit about your additional idea? If you're there, Maureen.
Sorry, I was on mute.
No problem.
Yeah, we spent a good bit of time actually on the artists on the platform, but one of the issues was and we agreed from the point of view of creation and people getting money and properly getting money for what they were doing in this new era of listening and streaming. But we felt that there would be a lot of work in it, and that it would definitely need some sort of support, investment, maybe somebody with lots of money altruistically, supporting it, so that because you'd have so much that somebody could there'll be some kind of value system where you could go in. You wouldn't just be bombarded with such a range that you couldn't cope, that you would be able to go in and then, have a sort of a certain type of music you might want to listen to and work through that on one day, rather than, having a difficulty trying to trawl through what would be hopefully a very large platform. So that was our idea.
Very, very good. Thanks, Maureen. Thanks a million. I see one there from Dervla Graham, opening the written arts to people with disabilities. And I see one from Fran Doonan, developing access towards booklet of stories from people with disabilities. Dervla, do you want to just talk about your idea there for the written arts for people with disabilities?
I actually got a bit overexcited there. Sorry.
No harm. This is what it's all about, Overexcited is good.
Fran was the recorder, so I'll let him do it. I don't want to.
Okay. So. Well, Fran.
Well, actually, I think Dervla's better placed since it was her idea. So I'm merely a pen in this.
A conduit.
A conduit, exactly. So Dervla, I am giving you full and complete permission to enlarge on this idea.
Take the podium.
Oh dear. I suppose, we both identified a common area, Fran and I, that we've worked with different people with disabilities, and so we were very inspired by Dave's idea about the disability charity, And as a result, then we, yeah, I suppose we just thought his one was music, and then it could be expanded to writing, because I think disability and writing aren't always seen as compatible, but they actually are.
Yeah.
So, and any kind of other art form as well. That would be how it could be expanded.
Perfect. Perfect. Thanks, Dervla. And there's one here from Sinead O'Neill. Collaboration using our new tools in the sharing and creating collective community events. Sinead.
Actually, Fergal, I might let Cathal speak about that,
No problem.
because that was mostly coming from him, if that's okay. Cathal, can you do that?
Yes, happy to. So we had kind of two main ideas in ours. One was the building on David's ideas of these collective community events, and to throw my own spin on it there, which I wasn't able to really share with the group in time. I think these are going to be very necessary, because there's this idea that's prevalent at the moment that we're kind of there's going to be a moment when we know this is all over. In a kind of a VE day, you know, the soldiers and nurses kissing in the street kind of way. And I don't think that's going to happen. The process of coming out of this is going to be quite gradual, and the normal that we're going to get to is not going to be exactly what we left. So I think there's going to be a real need for events to happen where we can actually mark this as a society, that we can actually come together and have celebrations. That are also, there's an aspect of mourning to it, but there's an aspect of celebration to it. I think we're actually going to need to engineer that. And I think artists and entertainers and event planners and technicians are going to be really necessary in doing that. And so that's my own spin on that particular idea. We're also talking about the no replicas idea that came up from Sean's work. That idea that what we're doing now, especially for those of us who make work in the live space, what we're doing now, it was by necessity is different from what we were doing before, and that we shouldn't worry too much about that and embrace the differences, but also that the normal that we're going to come to is going to be different. It's going to be influenced by what we learned in this new time, and that, picking up from what others have said, that we shouldn't leave behind the people who have suddenly been included. By virtue of the preponderance of new access points, that when we go back to making work for the live space, that we should leave the door open for people who, for whatever reason, engage better in this virtual way. I think that's roughly wrapping up what we said. By all means, Sinead or anyone else in the room, please jump in if I missed any crucial points.
Yeah. No, that's very good. What we'll do, because we're going to have another session a little bit later, what we'll do now is we have those recorded, and what I'm going to do at the end of the whole session is I'll be taking all the ideas once you send them to me, and I'll be sending them back to you in kind of a collated form for you anyway, and any new ideas that might be coming out from today or after today. I'm going to pass you back to Mary now, because we're going to move on now to our next speaker. So Mary, if you're there.
Great stuff. Thanks, Fergal. Okay, so yes, we're heading into our final three speakers. It gives me great pleasure in introducing our next speaker. It's extraordinary, the journey she has taken and where she has found herself. I used to babysit her when she was a baby, so it's quite a personal little piece for me. But anyway, Megan Nolan, we all may have heard of her. She's an author, journalist, and critic. She now lives in London. She was born in 1990 in Waterford, Ireland. Her essays and her work and her reviews have been published in the New York Times, the White Review, the Sunday Times, the Village Voice, the Guardian. Megan writes fortnightly for the New Statesman. So her first novel, Acts of Desperation, has just been published by Jonathan Cape in the UK and Little Brown in the USA. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. So over we go now to Megan to hear about her 5 ideas. Thanks, Sean.
Hello, I'm Megan Nolan and I'm a writer from Waterford. I recently published my first novel, Acts of Desperation, during COVID, obviously. we had completed the first draft of the novel before lockdown began in March last year, but all the editing process, all the publicity took place during lockdowns and during COVID, obviously. So I'm going to just talk to you a little bit today about Resurgence for writers, things that have come up in the last year that have been inspirations to us to keep going, to find new ways to work, and what we might take forward into the future. It's an interesting area because for a writer like me, you work at home anyway, but this year has really brought it home how vast our networks are, how much we really need each other, and all the many people that go into producing a book or an essay or an article, and all the ways that we've had to find to be together this year. So on that note, the first of my 5 points is alone together, using remote working for community building. So obviously we've all had to use Zoom and online programs to connect this year for meetings and for roundtable discussions, for events. But one thing I wanted to bring up was the idea of co-working remotely without a defined purpose. So a friend of mine who's an artist has started this Friday afternoon session where herself and a bunch of invited friends, including myself, drop in and do 2.5 hours on Zoom where we're all creating something, mostly because they're visual artists, they're drawing and painting. And we just do that together for 2.5 hours. There's no speaking, there's a little introduction, and the artist who leads the session will choose a playlist and maybe introduce the playlist or do a little reading of a poem to set the tone, or just to say hello to everyone and welcome them. And then for those 2.5 hours, we just work side by side in a way, remotely, but without any defined outcome. And I found that really important, really instrumental to try and keep a sense that not only do we meet to try and create productive outcomes, which we also have to do, of course, but we also can meet remotely to try and give some ambient company to each other as we work. Because that's one thing that as a freelancer, I do really miss, is to be in a cafe or to be in a library and you're working near other people, but not with other people. So I thought that was a really interesting approach to try and curb some of the loneliness that is going to be a part of artists' lives for the next while, where we don't even, in what is already a pretty lonely profession, we don't have even the balm of going to a cafe and working next to our friends or just working near other strangers. So I do recommend thinking about some innovative way that you could work with people without it being to do with a direct outcome. The second thing I wanted to talk about, my second point, is innovating the reading experience, book bouquets and collaborations. So this is something I've noticed in the last while, is that bookshops and booksellers have become really creative in the last year. Because they can't provide the full bookshop experience at the moment, they've come into doing things that are more curated for the receiver, which are more intimate than just ordering a book. So while it might be useful for some people to use the bigger online retailers, because of course they are cheaper, for anyone who can afford it, of course, it's better to go independent and local. And I've noted that in London, and I've seen it in Waterford as well, the book centre have done this a lot, is offering tailored packages, so where you have a book and some chocolates or flowers or whatever it is with it. Or what I find really interesting and attractive is the idea of these book bouquets, where it's a handful of books by different authors put together and sort of collated for the reader's particular enjoyment. So like if you enjoy one author, you may enjoy these 3 others as well, and receiving those as a package. And I thought that I've really admired that over the past year, watching retailers create these really special experiences for the reader that maybe didn't massively exist before, because readers could just go and browse and pick what they wanted. And I think that's something that we should continue with after COVID, because people who work in books and who are experienced booksellers are often, of course, the best people to recommend things and to put them together for a curious reader. The third thing I wanted to talk about, the third point of Resurgence was taking advantage of international opportunities. Obviously, it wasn't with our consent or our desire that this year everything has been online, but I think it's important to take away the positives as well as the negatives from what has happened. And one positive for me is that there are no barriers in terms of organizing international events with authors who are on different timelines and who would never have otherwise been able to join us in conversations. So for instance, when my book came out, Lauren Euler is an author and critic in New York, and she was able to interview me for one of the launch events. And that ended up being a really interesting experience and a really good encounter for both of us. And it would never have taken place if we weren't open to doing these online events. And even though they were possible before COVID, there was no real uptake with this kind of thing. And I think it's something that we shouldn't totally abandon once we get back to normal life. Because the opportunities for collaboration and encounters with international peers of ours is such a great resource. And I don't want to lose that once things do return to normal. And especially because if we're only ever encountering other artists in our direct communities just because of the practicalities of organizing events. So if I only end up seeing the same authors who live in my neighborhood here in London, and I don't encounter conversations with people who live all over the world and are of all different communities and different demographics as well, because often people with demanding jobs outside of their writing or art, such as caring responsibilities, or because they have young children or whatever it may be, can't make it out to an evening event all the time. To travel across London from a suburb to the centre is not feasible for lots of people. So I think that we're missing out on a lot by not encouraging those links to continue. We would be missing out on a lot. So I think that is something I'm desperate to keep, is our openness to allowing those international opportunities to remain once things do return a bit more to normal. The fourth point I wanted to bring up is related to the last, which is to continue to consider inclusivity. So more directly than about international opportunities, I think it's very important that the last year, there's many people who are disabled in some way or who have difficulties in experiencing live events and many other types of literary convention. And they've been able for the first time to actually participate and attend almost every event that they would like to. These, accessibility issues can be to do with the most basic in terms of building structures and events taking place in buildings which don't have sufficient entrance and exit needs and space once inside. And there can also be more subtle things such as someone with anxiety or who is on the autistic spectrum, who cannot handle confined busy spaces with people speaking at a relatively high volume constantly. And even I myself, I don't have a disability, but I have anxiety, and sometimes it's been really difficult for me to be in readings in person because you're in a very confined space. You can't leave easily without it being very embarrassing. And if someone's speaking about something that is triggering for your mental health and who's, and which touches on something you've experienced personally, it's really difficult to leave that situation. So I think going forward to remember that we have created actually inadvertently a really healthy way for people to participate, people who should be able to participate in our communities. And we should not let them be excluded once this ends. And we must make sure to take what we've learned from this year into the future when we do have live events again, in terms of streaming, in terms of interpretation, sign language, having subtitles for those who are hard of hearing, all these things that make our communities much richer by involving everyone who wants to be in them. My final point then is just to remember, this is sort of a bit of an obvious point, but it's something that has helped me over the last year, which is to remember your great advantage as a writer, which is that you don't need anything outside yourself. in very basic terms, if you've got a space that you can sit down and a pen and paper or a laptop, then you can do your job, and you may encounter difficulties with it, but you have the power to do your job, which many artists don't have. They need materials, they need certain spaces, and we're very lucky as writers that we do not need those things necessarily. And that's not to say we don't benefit from them and we don't like them, but we don't absolutely need them. And I found some power in that, in reminding myself of that over the past years, that you have everything you need inside of yourself and with very basic tools that are accessible to most people, and that we don't need a lot outside of that to create our work. And even though our communities have been hit this year by not being able to gather and exchange ideas freely in the way that we would like to, i.e., with social life involved in it, in terms of the work, we do have that power. And I would encourage you to remember that you've got the self-definition that many other artists lack because of their material needs. And yeah, I think that I'm very excited for literary community to begin again in a more concrete, physical way. But for the moment, you've got yourself, and we have these new avenues to be with each other and with others who were formerly excluded before this. So I think we're quite lucky as writers. And I'm really excited to hear what everyone else has to say about writing. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Megan, for that fantastic input. So much in those 12 minutes. Megan can't be with us today. Unfortunately, she was hoping to be, but she's caught up in so much PR, etc., for all her wonderful work. So we hope it all goes well for her, which I'm sure it will. We're going to hear from Owen Kilkenny now. He's a freelance project and production manager. He's toured across Ireland and the world with theatre productions from Landmark Productions, Rough Magic Theatre Company, and Fishamble, the new play company, Cush Came Dance, Abbey Theatre, and many more. In music, he's worked regularly in the National Concert Hall, as well as a variety of artists, such as the RT Concert Orchestra, Colin Wilkinson, Wallace Bird, Gabby Young, and Other Animals, and lots more. He's worked at some of the best festivals at the Traverse Theatre, Edinburgh, during the Festival Fringe, Galway International Arts Festival, Melbourne International Arts Festival, Dublin Fringe Festival, London International Festival of Theatre. This guy is some backstory here. So we're going to go over to Owen and hear his 3 or 5 excellent ideas. Thank you.
Hello. Thanks for having me along today on such an interesting and thoughtful topic. My name is Owen Kilkenny, and I have been a freelance and events and production manager for the last 15 years. I've worked mainly in Ireland on arts forms such as dance, theatre and music. 1 year ago we got a call to say that our event was shutting down. We were in the middle of a show in Cork, and a couple of hours later we had the set taken down, we had the lighting returned to Galway, and I was back in Dublin, and that was it for months. My talk today is around the idea of resurgence in the arts industry, and I'm going to look at things such as the online world, our place in society, as well as looking behind the scenes to speak to some of the benefits that have happened during the pandemic. Like the rest of the society, we all thought lockdown was going to be a short 2 weeks, a month kind of thing, but it quickly became apparent that that was not the case, and in fact it would last a lot longer. So as people became familiar with work from home and Zoom calls, people in the arts were wondering how they'd fit 300 people into their front room. First to close, last to open was the mantra offset, but being a resilient industry, we soon saw that different groups and artists found ways to make new online work and perhaps even thrive. There's always been a hesitance to embrace online technology from the arts, in my opinion. How do you replace that feeling of live? Is it even fair to try? Back in 2012, I wrote about this as part of my thesis, as part of the idea of the National Theatre of Great Britain was exploring filming productions and broadcasting them to cinemas around the world. Obviously, it's easier being a venue with those resources, but it was still a huge undertaking. However, perhaps even bigger was the morality question. When does filming a piece of theatre stop being theatre and start being a movie? But on the flip side, does the allowing reaching millions of people that couldn't make it to the South Bank of London fulfill a remit that a national theatre should have. I certainly came down on the side that as long as it's live, no reruns, it felt right to me. In a similar way to sport, I felt the live element needed to have a communal feeling, everyone watching something at the same time. Some in venue, some on TV or in the cinema. But what happens when nobody can be in the venues? What happens when the world is suffering a communal crisis? There was certainly something to fear from the online world when the pandemic hit, but in some ways our hands was forced. It started out with small Instagram and Facebook Live performances from musicians. There were Zoom readings by actors as people tried to figure out the format that worked best for them, and even things like where was the mute button. One company very early on was called Lock-In Events. They staged versions of plays like Howie the Rookie and expanded to do charity events and comedy shows, and much each time trying to test the ground and push themselves a bit further. Even more impressive was that they were doing this from Dublin and Canada, and they had contributors from all around the world. Another project to highlight was the BBC TV series called Staged, starring David Tennant and Michael Sheen. Having been scheduled to direct Tennant and Sheen in a play that is postponed by the COVID lockdown, Simon Evans, their director, attempts to begin rehearsals on Zoom. The show was filmed pretty much entirely on Zoom and on phones and personal devices, and it was a fun and quirky reflection of lockdown life. But it was so successful that it was picked up by the BBC and Netflix. Lockdown chic was part of its charm, and we can see the arts industry taking pandemic lemons and making Zoom lemonade. So what happens when we're full of Pfizer goodness and we can fill crowds in our foyers again? I still think we'll be left with a moral question of liveness and how to capture the sense of live, but I don't think we can go back to a world where we ignore the access to the audience that can't make it to our auditorium seats. I think the second big impact on our industry has been the greater recognition from society about the importance of the arts and its key to continued success post-pandemic. Very early on, money was made available for things like Other Voices to present a series of concerts online and on our TVs. They very successfully and cleverly brought some of Ireland's best artists and brought them to some of Ireland's most missed locations like libraries and museums and galleries. And they beamed them into our homes. Successful series were capitalized towards the end of the year by many live streams from venues around the country, providing employment and access to missed-loved artists for audiences. It also helped return the local by allowing venues to present programs that were more specific to their audiences and their localities. This was only made possible by a grant from central government and a direct investment from the state in the arts. Being a society locked in together meant a return to communal viewing of series. The older of us might be more familiar with before the advent of Amazon Prime and Netflix. One great example of this was Normal People, which provided gripping viewing to people in Ireland, the UK, and indeed the world. It was a great showcase of Ireland. It even featured the GAA, but it was important to note that that show did not come from nothing. It stemmed from books by a brilliant young author who credits help from writing groups in her local arts centre. It stars fantastic actors trained through one of Ireland's top Academy of Arts, and it's produced by a company who built from Irish funded movies and series, and it's commissioned in association by the state broadcaster. Getting the message across that funding of all levels of the arts leads to massive worldwide recognition. This is very important. We also had a new government formed eventually during this pandemic, and with it a new minister, someone who seems to recognise the importance of the arts and its ability to trickle down funding through the system and bring benefits to the wider economy and worldwide recognition, as mentioned before. So in one quick swoop, we've seen the arts funding raised to levels it's never been before, and that so many have tried to get it to. Our job now is to keep showcasing the benefits, both socially and economically, of that funding, and to ensure that it does not drop. The third and fourth areas are more so behind the scenes, but no less glamorous or important. As with our 9-to-5 colleagues, this pandemic has given us in the arts more time to reflect on the working conditions we have. Obviously, there's direct focus on things like medical diseases and cleanliness due to the COVID-19 spread. Funding schemes have often meant that as much money as possible is ploughed into the arts and not so much into the buildings that it's housed in. We also need to look at the conditions that we subject our crews and performers to. I know some money has been made available for these initiatives. Working with poor ventilation, low light conditions for hours on end, under time pressures, takes physical toll on our workers in a variety of ways, and I think this pandemic bringing those into focus is a real benefit. As much as anything, I think this pandemic needs to give workers a voice to identify these difficult working conditions without fear and recourse that there has been before. Working hours and ways of working have similarly changed, just like in mainstream offices. We're looking at more flexi time, working from home arrangements, and while that's not always possible in the arts, we need to explore the use of our times and demands on our workers to maintain a better family and work-life balance. Resources need to be given to allow more times for things to happen at a safer and indeed slower pace when required, and we have to accept that this might mean slightly less work happening, and that becomes a factor of our industry. Survey upon survey says that working conditions provide better output, but I think in the arts we've relied too much on our past resilience to get us through, and that is something that needs to change. Similarly, I think this pandemic has given us time to consider how we as art workers represent ourselves. Often in fast-paced, pressurized world, going from show to show or Arts Council application to Arts Council application, we haven't taken the time to look at our industry, to look how we represent each other and to our audiences and the state. Now that we have that time, and somewhat driven by this crisis, we've seen coming together to support each other and in different ways. Organisations like the Irish Theatre Institute and Theatre Forum have run courses on everything from applications to tax and PUP. The National Campaign for the Arts has done incredible work lobbying the government for things on like universal basic income and advocating for development of a system like this. We've seen unions like Equity increase membership, and even new unions such as Practice developed. An organisation called EPIC has come together to support members of the event industry who've suffered incredible losses over the year. The most important thing we can do now is to join and support these organisations so that they've the resources to fight for us when the industry starts up again and aren't forgotten when the roundabout of real life returns. We will need them at the next crisis, so we need to ensure they are supported now. My final thought is simply around the idea of the faith I have in our industry. I have faith in my fellow arts workers and to be able to get through this and to support and encourage one another. We have shown that we can get through this crisis and come out stronger. The lessons must not be forgotten for the future, but embraced. I have faith that we can do this together. Thanks so much for having me.
Miran Nadina Ershkalakeda. The people live in one another's shadows. We live for live shows. So this is the curtain call for an epic roadshow. We've a roll call of aficionados, artists, acrobats and gig goers, cooks, bookers and stadium riggers. From the line check to the order of malt on the front line, this is who we are. Creators, responsible professionals, an industry of entertainers who've been mandated to stop, being the first to close down. This isn't art versus industry. This isn't asking for a handout. This is the entertainment business in crisis. From small acorns, we generate billions. Our job is to make your lives better, and we have. You've turned to us for digital distraction. Now we urgently need you to understand the repercussions. Creativity takes courage. We need more than glib comments. It needs to be acknowledged. These are the moments before the lights go out.
Thank you, Owen. I think you'll all agree with me when I say that was truly powerful. Owen has talked about so much there. One of the things he has talked about is how the industry has come together, and how when this started last March, April and May and the conversation started, the conversation was about artists, and very quickly it became about arts practitioners, and it was very clear and agreed that there was a very wide range of people involved in this, and they all need to be talked about. And Owen is one of those people who should talk on our behalf every day, I suppose. Anyway, moving on very quickly, I'm delighted to introduce Siobhan Brady. Siobhan is a professional harpist and harper who holds the Guinness World Record for the highest altitude harp performance at 16,000 feet in the Himalayas. This was in aid of cystic fibrosis. Siobhan has toured multiple times internationally with the professional touring production, the Irish Harp Orchestra. Delighted to welcome Siobhan. Over to you.
My name is Siobhan Brady, and I am delighted to be part of this Resurgence for the Arts event to support a vibrant recovery for Ireland from COVID-19 by sharing my story and other inspirational projects that are happening in Ireland. On the 6th of September 2018, I performed the highest harp concert in aid of cystic fibrosis at Singla Pass in the Himalayas at 16,000 feet, the same height as Everest Base Camp, actually. As another reference, Carrauntoohil is only 3,000 feet high, so it was over 5 times the highest mountain in Ireland. I was awarded the Guinness World Record for the highest altitude harp performance, and I'm featured in the 2021 Guinness World Record book. One of the pieces I played at the summit is called the Napogue Medley by Anne-Marie O'Farrell, and my performance on the mountain is the music you can hear right now. In recognition for my achievement, I was presented with a mayoral scroll from Limerick City and County Council in September of 2019. I'm currently a third-year student at Cork School of Music, studying the concert harp with Anne-Marie Papin-Lavoisier. My journey starts when I won first in 2 competitions in London hosted by Kamak Harps. At the competition, this man approached me and my dad to be part of the highest harp concert and piano concert in aid of cystic fibrosis. He had done similar crazy projects like the Deepest Piano Concert and had won an award at the Edinburgh Film Festival for a project called Piano to Zanskar. The idea was if something had happened to the piano during transit, I would become the backup musician. However, as it happens, we went going higher with the harp and got our own record. Desmond is on the highest harp concert record as he read a poem during the section of Anne-Marie O'Farrell's piece. The poem was kindly presented by our president, Michael D. Higgins, who sent it to us before we flew out to India. In order to prepare for this high altitude challenge, my dad and I were fortunate to be offered access at the incredible facilities in Limerick at Delta Sports Dome. This simulates the amount of oxygen at 4,800 meters, which increases your stamina and is used by athletes like the Munster rugby team. The facilities are absolutely amazing, even if you're not preparing to climb a mountain. Here's a picture of my dad after we did one of the workouts. I decided to decline the post-workout tired photo, so you're just going to have to deal with Dad. Me and Dad liked the quote that was on the wall, however, which is a good message for anyone in the creative arts business. There may be people with more talent than you, but there is no excuse for someone to work harder than you. As well as sponsoring the transportation of the harp from Limerick to Ladakh in northern India, Kamak Harps also sent me a complete kit of sets of strings and levers in case we needed to repair the harp, which was definitely very much needed as the harp was damaged in the airport. Hypoxic training really helped us at altitude, which is actually really cold, even though I decided to perform in a dress. In fact, my dad and I were the only ones who had hypoxic training, and the rest of the team really struggled with the lack of oxygen, which was about half at sea level. 2 of the members had to take oxygen, and 1 had to be rushed down due to breathing difficulties. Sadly, on returning home to London after our trip, Desmond Gentle died on the 2nd of October due to thrombosis. Even before we had achieved this record, Desmond was already planning the next event. He wanted to raise even more money by performing the highest harp concert on Mount Kilimanjaro. For those who are not familiar with Mount Kilimanjaro, it is the world's tallest freestanding mountain at 19,341 feet, which is 3,000 feet higher than our current record, which is essentially a Karantuhul on top of where we were in the Himalayas. We're planning to do this in 2024 in Desmond's memory. Following the Guinness World Records Snapchat story that was posted earlier this year to promote the 2021 official book, which went out to their 5.3 million subscribers, I was invited to climb and perform on the top of Mount Fuji. Although Mount Fuji is only 12,000 feet high, it looks very similar to Mount Kilimanjaro, so it will be a good experience for the team when carrying the harp to the summit. You can go to www.thehighestharpconcert.com to track our progress. To prepare me and the team, we are working with Stephen Lappin, who runs virtual workout sessions during the pandemic. Stephen has devised a fitness plan for all of us so we can achieve the level of fitness necessary for our goals. Here are some other musical inspirations I would like to share with you. Firstly, I was selected by the Emer Noonan Music Bursary Award last year, which was run by the Noonan family and Cool Music in memory of Emer Noonan, who died tragically in France. She was a language student at UCC and a member of the UCC orchestra as their lead violinist. I was asked to perform at their annual fundraising concert, which took place in Cork, County Galway. However, due to COVID, it was cancelled. Emer Noonan's uncle, Michael Noonan, came up with a cool idea to move it to a virtual fundraising challenge. They got over 400 performers and raised €30,000, more than any other year. I submitted 2 virtual performances. The first one you can hear playing now. It is my performance of John Thomas's The Minstrel Adieu to His Native Homeland, which I recorded at the virtual European Science Engagement Conference. My second performance was on the Lever harp by the shores of Loch Rainey, which is where Emer Noonan had lived. Another initiative that caught my attention is the Inclusive Orchestra for Disabled Musicians. Lakela is a new initiative that has been launched by the Royal Irish Academy of Music with the Creative Ireland programme. It is a project that aims to develop ensembles for young disabled musicians. It will culminate in the founding of the Open Youth Orchestra of Ireland, which is the EU's first national youth orchestra for disabled musicians. It will be a cross-border orchestra, drawing members from the 4 provinces separately before bringing them all together as a full orchestra. An open orchestra is one where the ability is not a limiting factor. Those who participate will include musicians with Down syndrome, autism, and cerebral palsy. Unlike other orchestras that recruit based solely on musical ability, Lakela uses something called conductology to help the children connect through music. Conductology is a technique developed by Dr. Denise White of Ulster University and involves all the members of the ensemble agreeing on 18 gestures before they play together. This builds confidence and enhances communication. The orchestra will create its own music and will use assistive and adaptive music technology, including iPads, MacBooks, and motion sensors to allow people with physical and intellectual challenges to access music performance. It is a technology well suited to children who otherwise would not be able to learn a conventional instrument. The orchestra will be made up of musicians playing conventional instruments as well as those using technology. I first saw the Open Youth Orchestra of Ireland initiative on a newsletter from Ralph Parks about the projects that the Ignite Fund will be supporting this year. And as it worked out, my college CSM was chosen as their Munster province, so it was clearly a strong connection. The final initiative I was inspired by was the Harps for Hope initiative by Harp Ireland. I really loved this project as it showcased the best of the harpers in Ireland who I aspire to become. Over 200 harpers came together to perform and share their music online and perform a specially arranged setting of Fanny Power, which they dedicated to all who had suffered a great loss during the pandemic and to frontline workers. Anne-Marie O'Farrell was also featured in this event. She's been a huge support to me for the Highest Harp concert and providing her song The Pogue Medley, which you heard earlier. My Celtic harp teacher Janet Harbison was also featured, playing her composition by Strangford Waters, which Janet allowed me to premiere at the summit at 16,000 feet. She has been a major supporter for me for my entire career, and Janet's submission of the Harps for Hope can be heard playing now. Well done to everyone who participated. It was a beautiful event and hopefully can be repeated in the future. Harp Ireland are now planning a new initiative called Healing Harps to bring music to nursing homes who have been so deprived of visitors since COVID. Initiatives like this help prove what a strong sense of community we have, so I very much agree with the saying, we live in each other's shadows. I recognize that I am only at the start of my career, so I do not feel comfortable telling well-established artists the messages they should be living by, but these are the messages I tell myself. The first one is to be entrepreneurial. The day I decided to enroll in Cork School of Music instead of going for a career in maths, my dad told me I needed to be an entrepreneur first, and this would be the key to my success. I'm lucky that my dad is a successful entrepreneur and has taught me many key terms and techniques on how to benefit my career, such as pivoting and the mom test and product market fit. I would recommend that all musicians study entrepreneurship to help benefit their career. The second one is to be grateful. I'm grateful to so many people in my life, such as Anne-Marie O'Farrell and Janet Harbison, for their beautiful music and their musical inspiration and teachings. Ralph Parks, who gave us access to the hypoxic training, which was crucial in our journey. Helen Leitner from Kamakarps for sponsoring us to the Himalayas. My teacher, Anne-Marie, and my department head, Joan Scannell, for all the support they've given me through the college. Mary Noonan for the Music Bursary Award and all the contacts she's made me. Stephen Lappin for his encouragement and extremely tough workouts. My Aunt Susan, who put me forward for the competition in London, which kicked off this amazing journey. And special thanks to Fergal for inviting me to speak and share my story with you today. My third point is to be involved. Nothing will happen unless you take action. I heard a great talk from Emer Noon at the Shine Festival, which is an inspiration and empowerment event for young women hosted by the Shona Project. Emer, who was the first female conductor at the Oscars, shared her story, and Emer's message was be prepared to graft. You must first give to receive, so everyone should get involved. My fourth message is to be connected. My one advice to myself this year was to get on LinkedIn and connect with people in our industry. Your net worth is your network, so everyone should get involved. And the fifth point is to believe in the impossible. As crazy as it sounds, but this is a great inspirational quote from Francis of Assisi. It says, start by doing what is necessary, then do what's possible, and suddenly you're doing the impossible. I'm extremely, this quote was given to me by my dad, who I'm also extremely grateful for all his help in my career and in help in doing this presentation. Thank you so much for listening to my talk, and have a great day.
Thanks a million, Siobhan. And thanks to all our speakers there. I was going to maybe get a ukulele myself, just inspired by Siobhan there and bring it up to the top of my house and play a few notes, but I don't think it'll really have the same effect. But I'm inspired, but it's just so incredible what you're doing there, Siobhan. It's fantastic. So what we're going to do now, we're going to have a different kind of a workshop. It'll be a bit quicker. We're going to break up into groups. You've heard 15 ideas there. So you can have a chat, and the idea still that we'd have somebody who will maybe manage that just to be a kind of a leader and to record. And then we'll come back and we'll have a little smaller feedback session. And the big idea really will be with all the ideas that you have that you'll send to me, that they'll all come back to you as well. So we're going to break out into breakout rooms for the last time. This will be a little bit shorter, probably 5-6 minutes. So I'll see you in 5 minutes to 6 minutes. Thank you. We're running against the clock. We might go over the 1 o'clock just a fraction, but what we're going to do now with that particular workshop is if we can just quickly put into the chat box, the recorder people, just put in even one idea from your chat, and we'll try to have a look over the next 2 or 3 minutes and see what came out of that. Long term, what I'm going to do is if the recorders email me all the ideas, I'll collate them, we'll bring them back, and we'll see where we'll go from there. So we'll give the chat boxers a minute to get the ideas up. I was just saying to the guys here who are helping me at a 200 yards distance, of course, that this kind of event, we could have done this for a day, a little bit more spread out. We're doing a lot in 2 hours. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pick out just a few ideas there. Mike Stevenson, how are you, Mike? Entrepreneurial training for artists, in fact, all children, to look at possibilities beyond their art. Mike, do you just want to kind of give us a little idea of what that was about, Mike?
Yeah, the entrepreneurialism. I think that, and I've experienced this in Edinburgh, that you've got lots of artists working in very isolated circumstances. And I've been involved in the Scottish Design Exchange, for example, where they have a display, 2 major shops in the city centres of Edinburgh and Glasgow, where all the artists who are part of this collective can display, and they've got staff to sell and do all the marketing. But they've been trying to teach, the whole business skills thing to the artists at huge benefit, because having the ability to produce something is part of the equation. The other part, and most artists want their work to be seen or heard or enjoyed. And it's to give artists a sense that, their art is the base, the foundation of what can be, and to give them the skills so they don't have to go out to agents and pay, 80%, sometimes 80%, in order to get the important part of getting it seen out. That was that, I think.
Very good. Thanks a million, Mike. Isn't it great to hear that another Scottish accent here? These beautiful accents. There's one here. I'm just gonna. We're gonna have to finish as regards looking at them in too much detail. Remember, you are an artist first. That's Conor Nolan said that. Conor, what sprang that to you, or what brought that to you to say that?
Well, it was actually just in the breakout group. I didn't get a chance to talk, and so it was as much a message to the other lads in the group, and it was very much so underpinned by what Megan said. That as a writer, that everything is within you. But I would say the same as an artist. Everything is within you. It's that short space between your 2 ears. And you have the power. If an artist doesn't create, then theatre doesn't happen, the music doesn't happen. And so remember, you have to look after your own integrity. You are the artist, and you have the power within you. That was the point.
Well, no, isn't that a super? That's a super couple of sentences there. You've kind of said it all, which is brilliant. Now, we are running out of time, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask you to demute your speakers. If everybody could demute your speakers all at once, because we're going to try, because I'm in a live spot here, nobody in here, but we're going to try and create a live sense here. I'm just going to thank our speakers, Sean Corcoran, Siobhan Brady, Sean Kilkenny, David Duffy and Megan Nolan, and we'll give them a round of applause that maybe they can hear. And yes. Very good. And I really want to thank Mary Boland and the Theatre Royal team for partnering with ATPO and myself and hosting this event in such beautiful historic surroundings. This is just such a beautiful place, with key support from Michelle, Dermot, Anushka and Sean. So we give them a round of applause as well. Woo! And a bit of a whirl and a hoot. And then you can mute your speakers now. And then thanks to yourselves for taking part so enthusiastically, adding to the mix. Special thanks to the breakout room leaders and the recorders. And the real idea there is if you can send the ideas that you would have taken down to me at fergalO'Neill@atpo.online after the session. And what I'll be doing is I'll be collating them and bringing them back to you. So our final piece of this whole session is I'm going to try something that is so low tech it's almost under the table, but we'll give it a go. It's called a hand height pole. And the idea of a hand height pole is you use your hands and your body to show how you think. And if you raise your hands up above your heads like this, if you want to try that, that means you fully agree with what I'm going to say. If they're half raised like that, you want to try that? That means you only mildly agree. And if you're not raised, that means you could do river dance. And you have a great future in the theatre. But we'll practice with ourselves. But I think that the speakers today have given us some fabulous ideas on Resurgence possibilities for the arts. So I'm going to say, do you agree? And I've got my hand up so high. So I agree anyway. And it's been so lovely having you here at the session. I hope I can lead to great things. I'm going to give you a virtual hug. You can give yourself a hug. This is a hug for all of you. And hopefully someday we can all hug ourselves, actually. Not ourselves, each other, actually. Because I hug myself. No, I do that every morning. That's fine. I have to do something. And it's been lovely having you. And I want you to stay safe and goodbye for now.